I'm Michael James. I'm a music producer and a DJ. 36 years old right now, and I've been doing this professionally since I was about 19, 20 years old. I got my first break really in Ibiza actually. There was a party there called the Zoo Project. It was only in its like first year or so when I first went to Ibiza. You know, I always liked electronic music, and Ibiza was always the place when I was younger that was like this epicenter for that sound. So I decided to go to Ibiza for the summer, and the Zoo Project was just starting out, and I met the guys who ran it. I was trying to get to play everywhere, you know, and I was like kind of young and cheeky, and I was like, oh, can I play? They turned me down, obviously, but then they came back after the season in Ibiza and did some parties at Sankey's in Manchester. And because I was kind of local to the area, they asked me to come and play in one of the, in like the second room. And I played, and it went really well, and they did another one, and they asked me again. And then from there, they actually invited me to go and be a resident for them in Ibiza. And that was kind of a big changing point for me, really, because it was such a big party to be involved in at such a young age. So yeah, I became a resident there when I was like 20 years old. And yeah, that's kind of how things kind of took off for me, really, I guess. The first season I went, I played like a few small gigs in bars and stuff like that. And actually I had a nightmare, you know. I went there without really having much of a plan. I ended up living in about 14 different places in the space of 4 months, you know. It was super crazy. I came home and I'd lost loads of weight. Parents were like really upset. They thought that I'd been starving out there, you know. I remember some days where I had to like sleep on the beach or sleep in a car and stuff. Like, it was kind of rough. So I had no intention of going back there. I was like, I hate this place after that. But then, yeah, obviously I got the invitation to go back and be a resident there. And, you know, as someone who's an aspiring DJ, to go and be a resident in Ibiza in your young 20s is like, you know, it's kind of a dream. So I took the opportunity with both hands. And yeah, I played most weekends. That was, it was fun, yeah. Back then, Ibiza was like the best place for this sort of music, and everyone was there. All the big DJs were there every weekend. I know they still are, but there was more of a connection to the underground back then, I felt. Now there's still really great places that do really cool underground parties, but some of the larger parties are a bit more commercial now than they used to be. And back in the day, yeah, you'd meet everyone and bump into everyone, and like it was a really good place to make connections and get involved in the scene. I became interested in electronic music from a pretty young age, to be honest. My uncle was involved in the illegal raves in Lancashire, which is where I'm from. Like, my parents weren't really interested in electronic music at all, but he gave me like an Ibiza CD in like 1999. So I was like still at primary school, so I must have been like 12, 13 years old. I remember there was like these songs on there that I'd never heard anything like it before, and it just really excited me. And then I used to come home from school and put like MTV Dance on and listen to like dance music and stuff, and obviously it was like quite commercial stuff, but I got a real feeling from that side of music. Yeah, in secondary school we had like a music room, and it had like computers in there with this program called Dance EJ, which is like really basic version of like, you know, like Ableton or Fruity Loops. It's a really basic DAW, and I used to spend a lot of time in there just playing on things, putting loops together, and I used to find it really exciting. So I guess when I was 18, 19, me and my best friend got a copy of Ableton, and we just kind of figured it out, just pressing buttons, not really having any idea how things worked, you know, because then there wasn't all these tutorials online, there wasn't like lots of big YouTube channels teaching you all sorts of things. You just had to kind of figure it out, or you could get magazines, you know, like real magazines about them. Yeah, we just kind of pressed buttons, made some awful music, but just learned that way and just kept going. We kind of had a group we all came together from this scene, from going out and partying and listening to music, and we all liked the same stuff, and that's kind of how we grew as a group of friends. And, you know, out of my group of friends, maybe half of them were DJs at the time, you know, like bedroom DJs or whatever. And I just chose to pursue it further and kind of focus on that as like what I wanted to get out of my life. I was quite fortunate in the fact that I didn't really have any responsibilities, you know, in my early 20s. I didn't have a family to look after or anything like that, so I could kind of pursue my own goals and do what I wanted to do. You know, a lot of people who I was growing up with who were interested in being DJs and stuff, when they started getting married and having children and having mortgages to pay and stuff like that, and then they kind of thought, maybe it's time to give up on this dream and focus on something a bit more steady and a bit more stable. I didn't really have that. Put all my effort and time into making music and becoming a DJ, but I guess I was quite lucky because I was very young when I started to play in Ibiza, and once that sort of started and I was playing quite a lot and I was touring with that, I was like, well, I'm okay, I'm doing all right with this already, so let's just continue to grow on that. To a certain extent, being in the right place at the right time and meeting the right people. First thing that comes to mind is Gabriel and Anda Doppelwhipper. I don't know why, but that's the first thing that comes to my mind. And yeah, when I first heard it, it just blew my mind. The thing that really helped in my career actually was this video that was filmed when I was playing at the Zoo Project by dancetripping.tv, and it was before social media was such a big thing and there wasn't so many DJ sets being recorded. So they had this thing in Ibiza where they'd go around with the film crew, they'd record the audio and they'd record the dance floor and the DJs and stuff. And it became really popular, and they recorded one of my sets and I played that track in the set, and I think it must have been about 2006 or something, so it's quite a long time ago, but people still say, oh, I remember your dance tripping, and I think a lot of people kind of got to know me and about my music from that video. I mean, I listen to it now and half the music in there is not the sort of stuff I would play, but yeah, that track's in there and it has a special place in my heart, for sure. My first gig, I think I played in a small club in a place called Burnley, which is in Lancashire. One of my best friends, Lewis Nuttall, and yeah, I was just in a small room upstairs in the club, and there was my friends were there. There must have been about 15 people on the dance floor. Yeah, I mean, at the time I thought it was amazing, but looking back now, obviously it's yeah, it wasn't much, but we all start in these places. You can't just go straight to the top. It never works like that. So everyone, I'm pretty sure, has a similar story, but yeah, those were fun days. But nowadays, yeah, things are a little bit better, I guess. More better rooms, better sound systems, real clubs. Yeah, it's so completely different. It's two worlds apart, It's like a blend of house music and techno, as most of the stuff which this documentary is going to be about, right? I mean, everyone is in this sort of genre, but it's super divided into lots of small sub-genres, and it's very subtle, the difference between each one, and it's kind of difficult to find an exact place to put my music, I think. Because I like to make quite varied music. Sometimes it's more dance floor orientated, sometimes it's a bit more minimal. I'm really interested in the minimal sound and the Romanian sound and stuff like that. But also, at the same time, I like to put a lot of energy in my music and also try and make tracks that are a bit more dance floor oriented. So yeah, to kind of put an exact thing on it is pretty difficult. I like to keep it quite varied. Somewhere in between that, say if minimal's here and techno's there. I don't really go that far, and I don't go that far either, I'm somewhere in the middle here with a bit of house, a bit of techno. I think one of the main features in my music is always the bass lines, I think something that I teach people when I teach people about music is that the main things that get people dancing are the drums and the bass line. So if you've got a good groove in your drums, the bass line's got nice energy in it, people are going to dance to it and it's going to work. The rest, the sort of musical elements like the keys and the pads and the stabs and the effects and all that stuff, that's really there to create the emotion of the track, I think. I mean, when you're listening to something, maybe in a sort of more chilled environment, when you're not on the dance floor or you're listening to something at home, then you have more attention to sort of the emotional side of the music with the musical elements. Whereas in a dance floor, in a club, the focus is really on making people dance. I never had any plan to start teaching music. I was just releasing a lot of music, and I had my own way of doing it because, as I said earlier, I didn't learn anything from studying it or watching videos or anything. I found my own way. People find that interesting because it sounds a little bit different because I have my own techniques. So I remember some guys coming to me and just asking if they could learn a few things about what I was doing, and I was like, yeah, sure. So I remember I did like the first few sessions, one of the other producers brought some music to me and we sat down and I immediately was like, okay, we could make it better by doing this, by doing that, and I just started doing it. And the guy was just sat there like, what is he doing, you know? And I just made this track and helped him finish it off and I was like, yeah, there you go. And it was a really great track and it did well, but I didn't actually really teach him. And I learned through the process of doing that more often. Actually, it's more about inspiring that person or you know, encouraging them to do it themselves rather than for me to just do it for them, because they're not really learning if I just sit there and like, yeah, there you go, that's done, you know? Yeah, it does have an effect on the way that I work in music. You know, sometimes you get kind of stuck in your ways or you find a way that is comfortable and easy to do and you just kind of do it and you go through the motions when you're creating music sometimes. But when I'm teaching people, I want to show them something new that they don't know, perhaps, show them something more creative. And I think, well, why don't I use these things, you know? I'm teaching people how they can do like really interesting things and maybe I should use them more in my project. So that does have a small effect on it sometimes, I guess. And the other thing is there's a slight negative effect with it where I might spend 3-4 hours working on someone else's music with them. And then when I'm finished doing that, do I really want to sit in the studio and work on my own stuff? So you have to find a balance, you know, like I enjoy teaching people and I have a good group of people around me. I teach some really talented producers, some people who've signed lots of music to lots of labels. And I teach people who also don't really know much at all. But if I use a lot of my energy doing that, then it kind of takes away a bit of the energy for me to concentrate on my own projects. And it's really great for me to see the people who I've been helping out grow as artists and make a name for themselves in their own right, you know, especially now that rather than doing it for them, I'm inspiring them and encouraging them to do it themselves. So yeah, seeing some guys making careers for themselves because of the help that I've given them is very rewarding. And also, you know, like when they come back for the next sessions further down the line and looking at where they've come from and where they are now and being like, wow, yeah, you know, you're really taking it on board. Some people obviously find it easier than others. Some people have a natural talent for it and I just need to show them, you know, to polish a little thing here and there, you know. I love being on the dance floor with my friends, listening to music that I haven't heard before and taking the inspiration away from that. Just enjoying that moment with your friends. I think it's a really special thing. You know, we all were on the dance floor at some point, you know, and that's where we got the excitement from to try and do it ourselves. I remember being very young and going to parties and looking at DJs and thinking, wow, this is amazing, you know? Hanging around for the party to finish so I could introduce myself and say hello to guys and stuff. I think it's important to remember that when you're on the other side as well, you know, like when I'm playing, if someone comes up to me and they ask for a photograph or they want to say hello, then it's like, wow, this is cool. I remember I was that guy, you know, when I was younger, and now all of a sudden some people, for whatever reason, see me in that light. And I think it's very important as a DJ in that situation to stay humble and remember, you know, you were on the other side of the booth once too, you know? It's like a drug, you know, the response that you get from the crowd when you play a track or people going a bit crazy, especially if you're playing your own music, kind of just having those couple of hours where people are just going wild and you're just in control of it. I guess one of the best places that I've played, one of my favourite places to play is Sash in Sydney. And you're in this room which is all like glass around the DJ booth and all down the sides, all these massive windows, and you're outside the harbour and the sound system's amazing, the DJ box is perfect, the crowd are insane, and you just play and play and play. Last time I played there, I played back to back with DeWalter and Voigtman, and we played until 12 lunchtime, and the crowd were just crazy. I mean, even at 12 o'clock when it finished, took hours to clear everyone out. Everyone was just going wild the whole day, just seeing everyone smiling. I love to play in the daylight, you know, when you can see people's faces in the crowd and you see people connecting with each other, and I think that's what this is all about, you know, it's about connections. For me, something that's very important is the template that I use in Ableton. It's taken me a long time to get it exactly how I want it, but in the way that I work with Ableton, everything is already set up when I open the program. So all my mastering channels, all my buses, all my groups are all set up with all the plugins on that I would normally use to make my drums sound a certain way or make my bass line work better in certain situations and stuff. So everything's set up, ready to go, and that is kind of helping to create my signature in what I do. If every time I opened Ableton I started from scratch, everything's going to sound different. So I have like a sort of set template where everything is lined up to make it sound like my music. I mean, when you're playing regularly, you kind of know all your music inside out anyway, and you know what works because you played it last time. I guess like I have a long playlist, for example. Let's say before I have a big gig somewhere, I might have a playlist that's like 12 hours long. And it'll start from things that are a bit more like early hours, like warm-up stuff, and go through, and then at the end it's like, okay, we're going crazy down here. What I'll do is I'll walk into the club, see what the sound is like, see how the crowd are reacting to the person who's warming up for me or playing before me or whatever, and kind of figure out the vibe, how they're reacting to things, and that'll kind of give me a sort of rough idea of which sort of section of the playlist I want to be looking at. Sometimes, you know, you get some new tracks over the week or you haven't played yet, and they'll go into the playlist and you might take some out that you're getting bored of or whatever. It's kind of crazy because as a DJ you're always kind of thinking, I haven't got enough music. But the thing is, those tracks are only old to you, you know? They're not old to everybody else. The other thing is, when I was playing in Ibiza every weekend when I had the residency there, I had to vary my sets a lot more because I was playing to a lot of the same people every week. You can't just turn up to the same place and play the same set week in, week out. But when you're on tour and you're playing in England one weekend, Germany the next weekend, Italy the weekend after, you can play pretty much the same sort of stuff. Like, I mean, obviously dependent on the situation, but nobody knows that you're playing the same set. And if it works, it works. So stick to what works, you know. So last time I played in Sydney for Sash, I was playing in Bali after that as part of the tour. I went to the after party in Sydney and then had to fly pretty much straight to Bali. Me and Voigtman took a flight together and we had a really beautiful house booked for us for the rest of the week, and then we were going to play the following weekend in Bali. But when we arrived in Bali, I wasn't allowed into the country because I wasn't vaccinated. And the English embassy said on the government website that you didn't need to be vaccinated to go to Bali. You could take a test when you arrived. And when I arrived, they had no idea about that. Basically, they told me I couldn't enter the country and I had to stay in the airport. So I ended up talking to the British consul in Bali, and they tried to figure out something to get me into the country. And I ended up sitting in the departure lounge for 5 days maybe, which was horrible, you know? Like, I had to have they took my passport and all my luggage. So I was just sat in this departure lounge for days, and every day they'd be like, oh yeah, we're gonna let him in a few hours, and then I'd be waiting, and then the next day they'd be like, no, he has to go back to Australia, we're gonna deport him. So I was like, then the flight would leave to Australia and I wasn't on it, so I'm like, what's going on, you know? And that was pretty insane, to be honest, especially as I'd come straight from the party, you know, I hadn't even been to bed. So I didn't have a bed for like 4 or 5 days. And I was just in the airport not knowing what was going on. I had to have a guard with me because they thought I was going to leave the airport. I don't know how they thought I was going to get away, but in the end, we managed to organise something like Minister of Indonesia or something. It was crazy. Anyway, I ended up getting into the country on like Thursday, and I slept for like 2 days, and then yeah, played the parties, got food poisoning. It was an awful trip, to be honest, but at the same time, it created some great memories, and it's made for a fun story, you know, like in hindsight. Don't rush is the most important thing I can say to anyone who's starting out. Most people who try to get into this industry or are starting out in this industry are probably going to be in their 20s. You know, you expect things to happen quite quickly. I guess it kind of did for me, but that's not normal, you know? When you actually look at a lot of the big producers and popular DJs and anyone who's actually making a real living out of this career choice, they're all realistically at least in their 30s, and a lot of them are in their 40s, and some of them are older than that as well. And I think when you first start out, you just expect everything to just happen super fast, and it never does. And the other thing is to kind of take your time as well with regards to that, because, you know, I listen back to music that I made even a few years ago, and I'm like, God, I would make that so much better. And I think you have to kind of be patient with regards to that, because you'll only end up looking back and being embarrassed about the things that you did when you were first starting out, because you should always be getting better and you should always be aiming to improve. But also on the flip side of that, there's always going to be a point where actually you're ready as well, you know? Like, I listen back to some of my music from 4 or 5 years ago and I think, oh, it's not so good. But at the time, those records were like #1 in the charts. Everybody was playing them. So they were good enough, you know, they were good. I know that I could make them better now, but surely that should always be the case, right? You should always be looking back and going, okay, I'm better now than I was then. And if that's not happening, then you're doing something wrong. I made a lot of music when I was first starting out and I was learning and stuff, and I did release some stuff that I'm not very proud of, like now in hindsight. But I took because of that, even in the moment, I kind of felt like this wasn't quite right, you know? So I stopped releasing music. I just made music like constantly, all the time, and I never gave it to anybody. I just made it for myself, and I was like, just gotta get better, and just keep improving. And I got to a stage where I was like searching for new records all the time, and I was listening on vinyl shops online and stuff, and I was like, my music is better than most of the stuff that I'm listening to here, so maybe now is the time to try and put something out there. The only thing is that I was kind of a little bit scared of the rejection. I was suffering from anxiety at the time, and life was quite stressful, and I knew that if I sent some music to some labels and they were like, it's not for us, then I probably would have been at a stage where I was thinking if I was even doing the right thing at all. So instead of putting myself in that position, I uploaded lots of small clips of tracks to my SoundCloud account. So I put like maybe 10 tracks that were like 2 minutes long just in a playlist on SoundCloud, and just little clips of them, not like full tracks or anything. And actually from that, the labels got in touch with me. So instead of putting myself in a position where I was vulnerable, labels came to me and asked if they could release my music. So it kind of flipped it on its head. And it made it so much easier, you know, I didn't have to worry about who didn't like my music, I just focused on the people who did. And one of those people was Bernski, who's a very good friend of mine. And he had a label he has a label called Constant Sound and Constant Black. So they released my first record in years on their label. It was called 010, 101, 02, 02, 03, 03, 03. They were the track names. Super creative, I know. That was released, I think like 2017 maybe. And it went straight to #1 in the charts on Juno. Lots of big DJs were playing it. When Bernski came to me and he said, oh, do you have any more tracks? You know, let's see if we can follow this up with something. Obviously we're on to a winner here. So like, yeah, I have a few. So I sent him a playlist with about 100 finished tunes. He was like, what are you doing? You know, like, it's crazy. And I was like, I've been waiting for the right time. I've been making all these tracks, but I didn't think they were quite right. And he was like, going insane. So it took him a long time to go through them. And he was like, I would sign like almost all of these, you know? And I was like, you know, they're like, some of those were like 4 or 5 years old. I've been waiting perhaps too long. Maybe I should have jumped a little bit earlier into releasing this music. But anyway, he chose like 7 or 8 tracks, and we made a double vinyl EP. Again, it went straight to #1, and people were playing it in some waves and everything like this, and like all the big artists were playing the tracks. And it's just like, people were saying, oh, these tracks are crazy. And I'm like, I made them like 5 years ago, you know? And I didn't really realize the impact that music could have had on other people. I kind of just kept it to myself for a long time because I wasn't mentally in a position where I felt comfortable to put myself out there and risk that sort of rejection. So people who are really like scientists with music production, you know, it's like they're looking at the frequencies and everything needs to be done in a certain way because they learned about it in university, and it's like, wow, you're wasting your time doing that. To be creative and make music, you know, and enjoy it. I mean, even the first release I did on Bernski's label, I remember I went to his studio and he asked me, like, after we released it and it was doing really well, he's like, can I see the project? I'm really interested to see it. 4 kick drums all playing at the same time with no sort of compression on the bass or anything. He's like, this shouldn't work. I'm like, I don't know what I'm doing. But the thing is, at the end of the day, it sounded right. Don't waste your time getting too bogged down with the science behind creating music. It's about emotion. At the end of the day, music is art. It's about expressing yourself, right? So there is no right or wrong. No matter what you think or what you think is supposed to happen in music production, these things can help you to express yourself more clearly, you know, like using certain processes to make your sounds sit out from each other and making it's important stuff. But the most important thing is being creative and expressing yourself and making something that shows yourself in your music. You know, that is something that you can't teach, and that is the raw talent of somebody, and anyone can do it. You know, it might not make any sense and nobody might like it, but you can make music. Anyone can make music. Yeah, these sort of techniques and the science behind it is going to help you to express yourself, but that's not the be all and end all of music production, and it's perhaps the least important part of the whole process. A lot of people think you need a lot of gear to make music, and it can be fun. Like, I think it is far more fun to be hands-on with, you know, synthesizers and drum machines. But the majority of the work is done, in my case, in the computer, really. I use like my synthesizers to create bass lines. I use some to produce drums and stuff. Well, the MIDI control is done inside the computer for me anyway. I use Ableton Push a lot, so I'll program notes in there and then I'll adjust the sounds on the synthesizers and stuff. You don't need all those things. A computer is the most important part of the majority of what most producers do. I mean, of course you could have a setup without any computers at all, but it's going to be very expensive to do that. You need to have a pretty powerful computer as well at the same time, especially when you start using plugins with like reverbs and effects to kind of make your sound how you want them to and sit out more in the mix and things like that. Then you need a computer that can do that workload. So the computer's probably, in my eyes, in the way that I produce, the most important part of the whole situation. You can make music just using your computer and it can be great, especially nowadays, because a lot of the soft synths are reproductions, and very good reproductions of the hardware anyway. There's always going to be this sort of thing about hardware's cooler, it's like vinyl's cooler, and it's all the same thing, but at the end of the day, it's the end product that matters. It's not how you got there, it's what you come up with in the end. I don't think you should pay too much attention to that when you're beginning. I think the most important thing is to find a simple way to be creative. And also the other thing is, if you have so many pieces of equipment, you never really truly learn how to use one of them. When you're starting off, you're probably better off to have like one synth, whether it's a soft synth or a real hardware synth, and kind of just learn how to use it properly, rather than just flicking through the presets, be like, okay, that's that synth done, let's get another one, and flick through the presets. Work out how to make your own sounds within that and learn how to use it, because that skill that you learn will be something that you can use further down the line when you do get more synths and stuff like that. So if you know how to adjust the waveforms and the ADSR and the filters and stuff like that within a synth, then you know that when you get the next one, you just find where the buttons are that do the same things, and you can adjust it just the same as you can. They all do pretty much the same thing at the end of the day. They all have their own characteristics, but the majority of what's going on with the sound production is pretty much identical between almost all of the synths that you're going to be using. I think, yeah, it's something that people kind of can get a bit too bogged down with, and I think it's not really that important, to be honest. In my current situation in this studio we're in now, which is in my house, it's not really possible to play loud music so much. Neighbours, and I live with my girlfriend. Also, the sound isn't great in this room. It's got very high ceilings. It's not a very good shape for listening to music and having that clarity that you need. In my previous house, I had a great little studio space with very low ceilings, and like I had no neighbours, it was detached, so I could like really play music as loud as I wanted, and it was great to do that. Now here in this situation, I do like 99% of my work in my headphones. I bought some really good studio headphones from Dynamic, and these are great because they have open backs, so when you're doing a lot of work in your headphones, your ears are obviously taking quite a beating, and with open back headphones, the sound waves will bounce off your ears and then go out, and they can escape out into the atmosphere. Whereas if you're using closed headphones, like say Sennheiser HD25s or something, there's constant pressure just in your ears, and yeah, that can be quite bad. You can get quite bad ear fatigue. The most important thing, you know, you can make great music using super cheap headphones. It's just getting used to how things are supposed to sound in those headphones or in that space. You know, if I listen to some really good tracks, a reference track in my headphones, I know that if my track kind of sounds similar, then I'm onto the right path. I guess, you know, a lot of people do things like the car test, where you go and listen to it on the car stereo as well, you know, and it's good to kind of see how things sound on different speakers in different situations. You know, even if you just put the track on your phone and then listen to it through the phone speakers, like the low end might not be coming through at all. And obviously, you know, like that's not the situation that you're going to be listening to the music. But if you can hear the bass from other people's tracks and you can't hear it on your own, then there's something missing from your track. So it's good to compare with different situations and to different tracks that you know sound good. You know, you've played it in a club or you've heard it in a club, you know that's exactly the sort of sound you're looking for. It's good to have something to compare to. The problem with making music in the headphones is that you don't necessarily feel the low end. If you're in a studio where you've got a subwoofer and proper speakers and everything's set up nice and you can actually feel the music, you can dance around the room a little bit, that's obviously so much nicer and it's a very nice experience, but it's also quite difficult to know exactly how things sound until you've been in that situation for a long time. I've definitely had myself, and I'm sure a lot of people do. I mean, my real inspiration and the music that I really love is quite intricate, detailed, and quite stripped back, I guess, in a certain way. The thing is, when you become more successful, you start to play more peak time sets. People expect you to play with energy. Obviously, it depends where you play, you know. If I'm playing Hoppertoss in Berlin, I can play chuggers at the peak time for hours, for 6-7 hours, and it's like, yeah, okay, the people there, they get it. Sometimes you get booked in a place where, you know, the warm-up guy is playing more like tech house music, you know, and it's like, oh, I don't really like this, but I have to find a situation that suits my tastes and the taste of the people who are in front of me and the current situation that I find myself in. There's a spectrum, you know, so there might be this end where it's a bit more like stripped back, and then this end where there's you know, this is the peak of where I really want to go with regards to the energy and the music that I play. And I might end up in a club or a set time where the people like it up here. So I've got this window of music that I like that fits that situation, and that's where I'll play. And sometimes if my window's here, there's some people that it's like here, I'll just find that. So it's about finding somewhere where you're comfortable and you're not doing anything that you don't want to do. I don't want to play music that I don't like. That's not what I'm here to do, you know. People book me to see me play and to listen to what I have to share. But at the same time, you do have to be able to adjust to the situation that you're in. If you're only ever playing in this bracket and then you end up playing peak time after some guy who's playing tech house, you know, you can't just come on and play like this. Even though that's what you love or whatever, you've got to read the crowd and react to the situation that you're in. And at the end of the day, you're a DJ. Your job is to make those people on the dance floor have a good time. It's not about you, you know? It's not about your ego or anything like that. It's just about making sure the people in front of you have fun. So find a way within your own range that you're comfortable with to make that happen. And that can be difficult, you know, if you're really into super underground, minimal stuff. You know, if you want to play big parties and make a living out of this, you've got to kind of open your eyes a little bit, not give up on, you know, or cast aside your inspirations and your aspirations. At the end of the day, you have to be true to yourself, but you do have to have some compromise. Well, I guess I'm quite fortunate in that this is my career. So I don't really have anything else that I need to do. You know, like if I want to make music, I can make music, but there isn't like, I don't have a 9-to-5 job, you know, I don't have to be somewhere or do anything. Monday to Friday, it's up to me to inspire myself to do work as and when I can and when I want to, which is great. You know, I love that I have that freedom, but also it's important to keep yourself motivated and, you know, to motivate yourself. But realistically, with this career and this job that I do, there's only really the weekends where I physically have to be somewhere. So unlike most other jobs, the only real commitments I have is to turn up for my gigs. Really, that's the only thing that I actually have to do. So it's up to me to kind of manage the rest of my time and find a balance between having a happy life and doing nice things with my girlfriend, trying to see my family, seeing friends and stuff, and also doing the work. You actually have quite a lot of time to yourself, especially with the pandemic. You know, when that was happening and people were starting to go back to work, but our industry was quite a far way behind that in regards to the reopening of industries. So you spent a lot of time, you know, just on your own, which is kind of crazy. But yeah, I think with regards to the balance, you do have a lot of time. It's just making sure that you put enough time into making the music and finding music and stuff like that. But also, at the end of the day, life's about being happy. So just do what makes you happy. And if it's hanging around with your girlfriend and playing on the Xbox for 4 hours, then do it. You know, at the end of the day, so long as the work's getting done, it doesn't really matter. I make music most days. I don't always make music. If I don't feel like making music, I don't make music. At the end of the day, it's something that you should enjoy doing. There is obviously a responsibility, as it's my job to make music, to actually make music. But if you're not in the right headspace, then there's no point in sitting there and trying to make something when you're just not feeling it. If I come to a stage where I'm feeling like nothing's working, or I'm trying to make music and I'm not really feeling it, then the best way to get re-inspired is actually just to take a break. You know, to go away from the music and go outside and do something else for a while. Even if it's like for a few days. Sometimes I might not make music for a week. If I don't have that excitement to do it or that inspiration to go and make something, then I'll just take the time off. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. At the end of the day, if you want to sustain a career in this industry, especially when you're starting to come through in the early days of your career, I guess if you want to be known as a producer, you want to be putting out, let's say, 3-4 EPs in a year, right? If there's 3 or 4 tracks on each of those EPs, realistically, you need to make like 12 tracks a year. That's 1 track a month. And if you think about it like that, if you make 1 good track a month, you've made enough for the year if you continuously do it. Then really you don't need to stress yourself out like being at the computer all the time or in the studio all the time. I know a lot of people like work. Some people will make like a couple of tracks in a day. I don't do that. My tracks will take me, you know, like 4 or 5 days to finish a track. There's certain times where it might just click and I'm just like, wow, this is just working, let's just go with it. And then I get it finished, I'm like, Jesus, that's not like me, you know? But I like to add a lot of detail and stuff to my tracks, so they do take me quite a while. The number of EPs you want to put out in a year and actually how much music you need to do that. If you concentrate on making the music good and on the quality rather than quantity, realistically, if you only have to make 1 really good track every month, then just focus on making something really good. And it doesn't always work like that, you know? Like, if you're in the flow, then just go with it and make as much as you can. And if you're not, don't worry about it. Not to put too much stress onto making music, and actually just do it when you enjoy doing it and realize that you're only creating that pressure yourself. You don't really need to make as much music as you probably think you do. I haven't collaborated lots, but me and Bernsky have a project called Relic. So we did those tracks together. And the really good thing about the way we work together is that I'll take some of my equipment to his studio and we'll both be using our stuff at the same time. So rather than us both sitting over one screen looking at one snare drum, trying to figure out how to make it right, we can both concentrate on separate parts of the track at the same time. But actually, the most fun that I've had in collaboration is where we've had 2 setups synchronized together and we're both just jamming and listening to what the other person's doing, thinking, oh, this might work with that. And instead of like spending loads of time just doing little bits, you can get so much more done because, you know, I might be making the bass line while he's doing the drums or something like that, you know, or the other way around. And that for me is the most fun way of doing it. I think, especially if you're sending things back and forth, if I send an idea to someone, it might take them a few days before they send something back and you're kind of out of the flow, you know, it's like up and down. Yeah, so I guess with the way that technology is progressing, you have to find a way to adapt to the way things are going. Find some way to utilize those to your benefit. I mean, if we talk about the thing with like human emotion and human error and those sides of the music production, if we're talking about AI making the tracks, then obviously that would be lacking. But if you can get the AI and use it to your benefit, then you can use it to help you to express yourself. So you could ask the AI to help you with something like what keys go in the scale or something like that. That's a completely different thing, and actually that's a really useful tool to have if you don't really understand things about music. You know, you could ask it what the best frequencies are for this, or how should I make this sound a bit more like this, or whatever. That is actually quite cool, I think, and yeah, that will probably be something that will be available for people, probably is already, really, with like ChatGPT and stuff, to ask it simple questions to give you advice. That's completely separate from AI actually generating the music itself. And I think you should take advantage of the tools that you have at your disposal, for sure. I'm just about to start my own record label called Moving People. Said that weird. Yeah, I'm just about to start my own record label. It's called Moving People. The idea is that the music makes people move, as in dance, and also moves them emotionally. I guess that's kind of the double meaning of the name. It's quite interesting actually talking about AI, because I used AI to help me create the logo for the label, which is kind of crazy. Because I had this idea that I wanted it to be like, not cartoon characters, but like a Keith Haring sort of painting, like with the sort of cartoon figures. But I didn't want it to look like Keith Haring. It's like, how do I portray this, get my idea across to a graphic designer? And I spoke to people and I had them come up with things. I was like, it's not what I want, but I don't know how to explain what I want. So I actually just asked AI to do it for me. Can you create me vinyl artwork for a 90s acid house record label called Moving People? And that's what actually generated the initial idea for the logo. And then I sent that to the graphic designer that was one of my really good friends, and he used that to kind of inspire the logo, which is kind of crazy that we're just talking about that. But the idea behind the label is to just have somewhere where I can put my music out that I like, you know. This is another thing that touches on the whole idea of sending music to people, the idea of rejection, the idea that everyone has a completely different perspective of music. So you might think it's the best track ever, you send it to a label, they don't like it. Doesn't mean it's a bad track, it just doesn't fit there. The thing is, when you have your own record label, you can kind of just express yourself however you want. So it's kind of taking it up another level. You know, you're kind of deciding, well, these are the tracks that I like, so I'm going to put them out. And maybe it's not going to work out, or maybe people are going to love it. But instead of really asking what's mainly in record labels one other person's opinion and making them decide which track should be on there, you kind of just putting it in your own hands. A little bit nervous about it too, because you're kind of just putting yourself out there again. But it's good to have a platform to be able to just put my own music out there. If you're going to start something new, like a label, you need to have some sort of following built up as a producer already, you know? Like, if there's a brand new label with a brand new artist on there, it's not going to get seen by so many people, right? So if you're an unknown artist, but you're on a label that's well known, then that artist is going to get recognized because people are going to be listening to the music from that record label already. If you're just searching for music, you're like, oh, there's a new release on this label, I like that label, you're going to listen to it no matter who the artist is. And the same works the opposite way around. If there's an artist you really like and it's a label you never heard of, you're still going to listen to it because you really like that artist. If neither of those things are known to you, then it's kind of difficult, right? So I think now, after having released quite a lot of music that has been relatively successful, I think it's a good time to start my own label and be able to put my own things out there without relying on other people, working around other people's deadlines and working within other people's tastes, and actually just being able to do what I want to do, because I'm at a stage now where hopefully enough people know my name that they'll listen to the music anyway, and hopefully they'll like it. We'll be working on some collaborations with good friends, and I'm thinking about maybe doing like some digital releases with it, with regards to like, you know, close friends of the label and stuff like that. And then yeah, trying to do some like events with it as well, I guess, and just building a brand around that. I think nowadays you don't find so many people who are super successful DJs that don't produce music. There are some, and there are some very good ones, but it's quite a rare thing to come across now. You know, you kind of feel like you have to have both. And I think if you look at anyone who's doing really well or is very successful in this industry, 90% of those people are connected to a big brand as well. That brand might not have been big when it started out. Like, my brand isn't going to be a big brand. It might be eventually though, and to have the whole brand attached to something and have like a crew of really nice people who I care about, who I want to see do well, who are good friends, and makes like a sort of family and you know, come together and build something. I think the potential is always there for something to be really, really successful. And it's something that I would like to invest more time into, because I like to help other people. You know, I spend a lot of my time teaching people, supporting people. I have DJs who are friends who call me up and ask me for advice about gigs and all sorts of things, and I try to always help people where I can, and it would be nice to have like a platform where I can kind of build something with a lot of other people. So that's one of the main things that I'm working on at the moment. I'm also working on a new website for tutorials and teaching people. So I started a project in lockdown called Music from the Source. So during the pandemic, a lot of people had a lot of time on their hands, and a lot of people wanted to learn how to make music. Lots of people who were interested in the industry all of a sudden had this time on their hands, and they were like, oh, now is a good time to start to learn music. So I decided that I would create a platform to show people techniques, and not just from myself, but from other friends I have in the industry as well. So we've got a lot of other producers to create short tutorials. And it wasn't about making money, it wasn't a business. I didn't make any money from it. It was all free stuff that I put on Instagram. And I wasn't sure how it was gonna go, but when I put the first video up of myself, like within a day I had 1,000 followers on there. So it was pretty crazy considering, you know, I'm not like super famous or anything like that. So yeah, there was a really good response to it. So I continued to do that and build that. And there's an endless amount of people in the world who are interested in this music and this industry, and being able to share information between people is a really great thing. I've always thought, you know, we're always stronger when we work together. And I think in this industry, a lot of people find it like as a competitive industry where people are trying to fight over who gets the gigs and they don't want to support each other. And I've never really seen myself as a part of that. I always like to try and support others and help them where I can. And I think, you know, if we all help each other out, we're all going to benefit from that. To create this website was something that I thought was a really good thing to do at the time. And now I think it's at a stage where there's so many people who have these websites with subscription services and stuff like that, where lots of people are learning how to make music. And I think, like, compared to maybe 5, 6, 7 years ago, people were going to university to study how to make electronic music, and I think I never did that, but I have friends who did, and from what they tell me is they spent a lot of time learning how to record bands and things that aren't really relevant to what we're doing. And if I was a young person looking to learn about how to create this music, I want to learn from the people whose music I listen to, you know, like being able to learn how a certain artist makes music when you buy all their music. It's like, wow, that's something that's a really great opportunity for you to do. So for me, it makes far more sense that more people are moving towards using these to learn music, these sort of subscription services, than going to university to learn, you know, the science really behind it. So yeah, I think it's a really good opportunity. So me and Rich Next from Fuse are setting up a website at the moment, which is going to be really special, and it's going to be focused heavily on the community and helping people out and bringing people together, which I think is, at the end of the day, what all of this is about.